Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live stream. And first and foremost, we're going to begin by tuning in to Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC. We're going to first tune in to his interview with President Joe Biden, which is a wonderful achievement. And I'm looking forward to this interview. And I wanted to experience it together before we dive into actual news. My apologies for late. Tuning in today, a bunch of meetings. I announced yesterday that we're working on Honest Foundation as a nonprofit, which includes a lot of meetings. Hence, my days got a bit longer, and so I could not come in earlier. But Lawrence O'Donnell is now on television. I'm looking forward to his interview. So let's tune in and experience it together. And let's turn the sound.
I want to begin where you left off in this room last night. I know you couldn't see me. I was way behind the cameras in the back of the room there under Mr. Lincoln, getting my peek at it. But I could see what America couldn't see. I could see your family, the vice president on that side of the room. I could see the first lady and the vice president holding hands as you were thanking them for everything they brought to your work here. When you got up from that desk last night, that was really the final big public moment in a 50-year political career. Yeah, that's how long it was. You've served in government longer than any person who's ever served in this job. What did that feel like at the end of that speech? We were pushed out of the room as people were surrounding you, hugging you, and as that emotion was filling the room. But was there a sense of the release of a burden getting up from that desk?
No, but there was a sense that of serious concern. You've known me a long time. I really am concerned about how fragile democracy is. I mean, that sounds corny, but I mean, I really am concerned because you've heard me say it 100 times. I really think we're at an inflection point in history here. We're unrelated to any particular leader. Things are going to change drastically. And it occurs every 5 or 6 generations. And it usually is generated by technology, usually generated by, I mean, for example, if Gutenberg didn't invent the printing press, how would Europe ever gotten united in any way to understand what each country is thinking? I mean, it sounds stupid, but it really matters. And what I realize is that, look, I got involved, I didn't think about it this way, but I got involved in public life because of the abuse of power. I mean, my dad would say, you know, the greatest sin of all is the abuse of power. And I was raised in a circumstance where, like I used to always talk about how the worst thing ever happened to me was I used to stutter when I was a kid. And you really get made fun of when you talk like that. And, but I realized maybe it was the greatest gift I ever got, because there's so many people who are in circumstances where they have something that they're dealing with that's beyond their immediate control. And I watched how I was a runt when I was a kid. I was a small kid. I was a pretty good athlete all the time, but I was, and you know, I learned how to fight when I didn't want to fight. But when you get made fun of, you learn to step up. But what it did was, it made me realize that there's so damn many bullies around. And I now extrapolate that all the way to democracy. The reason for all the safeguards out there is, in a very trite way to say it, keep the bullies from taking advantage of everybody else. They're basic guardrails. And I think that this concentration of enormous wealth and power in a circumstance where everything's changing, and the biggest thing is changing is how we communicate with one another. I mean, all kidding aside, did you ever think get to the point where you weren't sure who the editors were? Who's out there saying, no, you can't print that? You can't say it's not true. I mean, it's like, and when the when people aren't participating in paying their fair share, I have no problem with people making millions of dollars. But for God's sake, pay your fair share. And taxes and participation. And so I don't know. I just think things are at a point where it's awful hard to. I've had 4 of your colleagues the last 4 years tell me they're worried they're going to be real serious players like you, not you, but your caliber, worried about whether or not they're going to be held accountable for telling the truth. When the hell's that ever happened in America? I mean, a long time. So I guess what I'm worried about is that the thing that keeps it on track are the guardrails. There's a Supreme Court that's independent, but accountable. There's a Congress that you speak your mind, but you're held accountable to basic standards. There's a presidency that says you have really limited powers. I mean, you're the top dog, but you can't dictate everything. And I don't know, we just seem to be chipping away at all those elements.
Last night, you issued the warning about the power of the tech industrial complex, an echo of President Eisenhower in this very room in his farewell address, the warning about the military industrial complex. And you said that an oligarchy is taking shape that threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. How does this oligarchy affect people out there who've never used the word oligarchy, the people who you're saying might not get a fair shot because of the way this is going?
Well, look, if the decision is made that the multi-billionaires, the super wealthy, the wealthiest people in the world, begin to control all the apparatuses from the media to the economy, then who do I get to fight back for me? Who do I get to? Mm-hmm. I mean, look, I think everybody deserves just a shot. Not a guarantee, just a shot. How the hell can you make it in society today if you don't have access to an education? You don't have access to adequate health care. You don't have access to the opportunity to have a job that you can handle, where you can make ends meet. I mean, one of the things I think there's 2 things I'm proud of so far. I know they'll last. We changed the basic formula of how to make an economy work. The trickle-down stuff about, well, let the people go out and make a lot of money, and the benefits will flow from that will trickle down to middle class and working class people. My dad used to say, not a whole lot ever trickle down his kitchen table. And so, what I did was, I admit to you, I didn't know. If Pat Moynihan had been around, I could just ask him, he could have told me. But that back in the early 30s, when Roosevelt was trying to protect unions from being overrun by corporate America, they passed a law that said that when a president is given money by the Congress, he should spend that money hiring American people to do what it was needed to be done and using American products. That's been honored in a breach. So we focused on that. That's why I worked so damn hard to give unions more power, to give unions the ability to negotiate. And I think that's what we did is we invested more in America. That's why the CHIPS and Science Act. Well, hell, we invented the damn things. We modernized them. We used to have 40% of the market. But what happened? Corporate America and a lot of politicians decided that let's find the cheapest labor we can find in the world to build these little chips about the size of the tip of my finger, and then import them. So we'll pay a hell of a lot less to have them made, and then we'll import them. And we import them, we'll make more money because we're paying a hell of a lot less for them. Well, guess what? This thing called supply chains. when pandemic hit, it hit the whole world. It hit everyone from Taiwan to Asia to all across Japan, all the places where they make these chips or starting to make these chips, Korea. And guess what? We found out you need about 300 to build a new car. Well, you can't build new cars now, so guess what? The price of automobiles went through the roof. The cell phone you have, you need a chip. You need a chip for a weapon. You need a chip for everything. And so I just thought we weren't fighting to get in the game again, to be the leader in the world on economic initiatives. And not that we weren't going to share with anybody, but that we were not going to allow people to cut us off. And so when that happened, everything I did, I made sure that we were making sure that we're spending the money, hiring. If we're going to build a bridge, hire American workers. If we're going to build a bridge, use American steel. Use the things that grow the American economy. We weren't growing the economy. So when I talk about what's going on in terms of these, what's the investments that are being made, the investments are made, find the cheapest labor anywhere in the world, bring it home, find the cheapest way to spend it, to engage it, and make the most money you can. Well, guess what? It really damages America's ability, any country's ability to compete. Anyway, not sure.
You have had the busiest last week as president than any president since Jimmy Carter, both engaged in the same thing, a hostage release negotiation, which seems to have succeeded. Did you have any discussions about the ceasefire negotiations with the president-elect Trump this week or last week as the deal was coming to a close?
No.
Have you discussed it with him at all since the election?
No, very, very briefly. When he came in here, I spent 2 hours with him to try to change the nature of the transfer of power so it was done peacefully. And I told him what I was doing, what I thought could happen. But what we did, we brought in the people, or going to be his national security people. We brought them in closer to tell them what was happening as we hand this off. Look, the idea that we're going to be in a situation where we could continue to have the chaos in the Middle East without the running a risk of starting a regional war is really, really not possible. And the idea that Israel is going to be able to sustain itself for the long term without accommodating the Palestinian question and their safety, their meaning the safety of American Jews, not possible. It's not going to happen. So I've been spending a lot of time the last 4 years with the Egyptians, the Qataris, with the Saudis, with the Arab countries to talk about what is their interest. Why isn't their interest to see this change, this dynamic change? And I kept reminding my friend, and he is a friend, although we don't agree a whole lot lately, Bibi Netanyahu, that he has to find a way to accommodate the legitimate concerns of a large group of people called Palestinians who have no place to live independently. And so how do you deal with those things? So I did really put together, if it doesn't work, I got to take the blame for it, a plan with my national security team. But I believe that we could make it attractive to the Arab world as well as to the Jewish community to accommodate the kind of changes necessary. Get the prisoners released, get a ceasefire, move in a direction where we agreed how this was going to work and how Israel's troops were going to move, how we're going to bring in rebuilding the Gaza Strip and the economy, how we're going to clean all this up, how we're going to protect Israel. In the meantime, what we were able to do, and I know it was very controversial when I did it, we also decided that we were going to protect Israel from outside sources. So when Iran thought it was going to blow Israel off the map, they had those thousands of missiles heading their way. Well, guess what? We put together the countries and didn't let it happen. Now, every one of the countries and the groups and the like Hezbollah and Hamas, and they're all a hell of a lot weaker. Iran is significantly weaker than it was before. Israel is in a situation where it is physically stronger in terms of protecting itself from outside interference from major powers. In addition to that, you have a circumstance where all of a sudden, people are beginning to figure out, well, it makes more sense if we work this thing out a little bit. I've been dealing with, since I got elected, with the Saudis about, I introduced when the G20 occurred, a proposal as to how to connect everything from India to England. And because there was a natural corridor of economic development of that way. And, I said, well, no, that'll never get passed. I started this initiative, used to be called Build Back Better, but now it's called PIIG, whatever. And because how do you make it in the 21st century with all the changes taking place in technology without having an infrastructure that can sustain the changes? And most of these countries countries in Africa, for example, are way in debt. Mm-hmm. And don't have the infrastructure to capacity to build the infrastructure. And so that's why, remember when they said, well, we'll never get an infrastructure bill? Well,
listen, I said you'd never get an infrastructure bill. With my legislative experience, having worked in the Senate, I didn't see how it was possible with this tiny, smallest Senate majority in history. To this day, it looks like a magic trick to me how you pulled that off.
Well, look. The argument I made to the congressmen and senators who has come down is how can you lead the world without having the most modern infrastructure in the world?
You combined domestic policy and foreign policy
Absolutely,
in a way that I've never heard another president do.
Well, by the way, because it's necessary. There's no way to implement our foreign policy unless we're, in terms of our economic policy, we're in a strong position to do it. Look, Lawrence, you're one of the most informed people I know. I'm not being solicitous. Well, I shouldn't say that, it hurts your reputation, but all kidding aside, think about it. How can, if we don't lead the world, who leads the world? What happens? I don't mean dominate. I mean lead the world on basic fundamental principles like the UN Charter, those kind of. Who steps up? Who has the capacity to do that? We have the size, we have the scope, we have the ability, we have the technology, but we just have to get back in the game. And that's all I've really done is take an economy that accommodated the foreign policy that allowed us to change the dynamic. For example, I mean, I knew what Putin was doing when he was amassing forces. Everybody says he's not going to go into. I knew what he was going to do, so I.
When did you know he was going to go in?
I knew he was going to go in about 3 weeks before he amassed those extra troops along the border.
And when did you decide? When did you make the presidential decision about what your response, this country's response, would be? Because you had to be given a menu. There's a menu, always a menu.
But the menu.
The menu includes doing nothing a lot of times.
That's right. There is a menu. But I already knew what the menu was. Look, Henry Kissinger called me 10 days before he died. And he said, not since Napoleon has Europe not looked over its shoulder at Russia with a sense of dread until now. I started, when Putin said to me he wanted to see the Finlandization of Europe, I said, I'll tell you what you're going to get. You're going to get the Finlandization, you get the NATOization of Finland. And I was talking to the leaders of Finland as well as Sweden. And I said, look, you guys have a real problem. And I spent over, I think it was, they calculated in the first couple of years, about 180 hours trying to put NATO back together again. Working, on the phone, in meetings, going on, saying, look, we got to do this. Because if we don't, what happens? What the hell happens? None of those countries alone can sustain an onslaught alone. So we tightened NATO, made it stronger, significantly stronger. And all of a sudden, Putin found himself in a position, well, wait a minute, where the hell I go? They've lost over 670,000 people. I mean, either wounded or dead. Brought in the Chinese, the Korean, North Koreans. They're losing big time too. It doesn't mean they're going to lose everything, but at least they're not going to be able to have the kind of win he thought. When I sat down with him in I guess it was in Switzerland, before we took office, but after we had won, and was trying to work out something on nuclear power to see we wouldn't go to space with nuke. And we got into this debate about what was Europe going to look like. And it was clear to me, if you read his speech, go back and get the speech he made early on. He talks about Kyiv as the birthplace of Mother Russia. That is, all he wants to do is reestablish the old Warsaw Pact. He wants to establish that control over it. Can't let that happen. This guy is not a good guy. He has, anyway. So,
you made the point in your State Department speech, it was quite striking, that you're the one who has walked the middle of Kyiv. Putin never got there. And I'm not sure anyone, I'm sure no one would have predicted of these two leaders which one is going to be the first one in Kyiv when this war started. And when this war started, there was a tremendous tension about the possibility of nuclear confrontation, the possibility of Vladimir Putin using nuclear weapons. Did you have any direct communication with Vladimir Putin to deter him from using nuclear weapons?
Well, I did. When he started talking about tactical, I said, this guy wants to use tactical nuclear weapons. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons in Europe scares the hell out of everybody, including the Russians. Including the Russians. And so what I made it clear to him, look, he said to me that what he wanted to make sure that there were no nuclear weapons in Europe, in Ukraine, that they weren't a member of NATO, and that they would not be, and he started off one of the conversations by saying, I know you can take me out tomorrow. I know you can take me out tomorrow from Ukraine. You can strike Moscow. You can strike. I said, well, that's not a problem. We've already taken the nuclear weapons out. So took them all out. There's none there. We're not going to put any back in. And they're not going to become part of NATO until they change their system significantly. We're going to continue to help them grow if we can, but those two things aren't going to happen. But you're not going to go in and take them. You're not going to go in and claim the area. And you remember, Lawrence, when I said they were going to go in, everybody said, oh, no, that's not going to happen.
Again, I didn't think it was going to happen. An expert I know who works in Ukraine told me it's not going to happen. No one here in Ukraine thinks it's going to happen because it seems so irrational for Putin to do that.
But listen, but read what he said. Go back. This guy means what he says. He really talked about this being part of Mother Russia. He thinks,
yeah.
And so it's a little bit like, you may remember, I found myself with the former Pope, who was much more conservative, and he wanted to see me after I spent some time in Poland, because I had said, remember John Rich, John, great guy. John and I went to Poland, and I came back and said, they're gonna leave the Warsaw Pact. They're not gonna be, a year from now, they're not gonna be part of NATO. He said, don't write that. You'll ruin your reputation. You'll ruin your reputation, don't write that. I was confident it was true. You could see when you talked to them what was going on. And the end result was that, okay, what happened now is they pull out. All of a sudden, the whole dynamic changes in Europe. Everything's moving. Remember what was going on in Hungary at the time? Remember Tom Lantos and talking about all? Anyway, the end result was that Europe was beginning to lose its structure. And I was convinced you could build a structure that was economically and politically more open and sound, and without getting into a continuity nuclear war. That's why we never put American forces in there. I didn't want him to have an excuse to say we're putting the other major nuclear power in the world. That wasn't the case. And so the end result of it was clear to me what he was going to do. I got the National Security Council to move in a direction where I could use the data without revealing national secrets, that they were going to move in. They moved in. By the way,
You revealed a lot at that time. I have to say, we've never seen anything quite like that. You publicly revealing what you believed the intelligence showed Vladimir Putin was going
and
to
the
do.
reason why I did is I wanted people to believe me, know what I was talking about. I knew more what I was talking about at that point because of the position I was in than anybody else did.
Sure.
And when they said, he might never do that, it's like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Can I ask you about the decision you made in the middle of this war in Ukraine that no president before you has ever made? And that was a decision to enter a war zone not controlled by U.S. troops. I am sure there were people who walked into this room and advised you not to do that.
Everybody kind of, look.
I mean, I meant for security reasons.
No.
The Secret Service could not have been happy the day they heard that.
No, I know. They were very unhappy.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that Putin would dare take out an American president. I was worried, concerned about a radical element within Ukraine that was under the control or working with the Russians might try to do. That's why we went so way out of our way to get the best people to travel in that 10-hour ride in that train. And, but I thought it was important that we demonstrate to the rest of the European leaders, stand up, man. We can stand up and do this. We can prevent this from happening. My concern was if we didn't go, we didn't show up, then who leads? What happens? I didn't think it, by the way, I didn't think it was, I've got to go to Ukraine, but I think it was important that we treat Ukraine like an independent country, wanted to talk to them, I wanted them to know that we were with them. And it was the best way to do that.
After this commercial break, we'll resume the unedited interview exactly where we left off.
Bonnie, you're right. The press lost the election, and I'm a bit speechless because how open he is. There's many things that I guess, given that I'm a normal person and I can communicate with people and worked in diplomacy, that some things that I knew of based on national security council and people, I don't want to name names, but he's very open and very frank. And David, thank you for commenting. You said that all of this could have been part of campaign messaging. True. Also, this was part of the negotiation at the moment. So making anything part of campaign messaging could provoke Putin to do something that could have been used as a reason to strike Ukraine. The tactical weapons, and that's pretty much the only ability that Russia has. Bonnie, it's heartbreaking and consequences will be monumental. Indeed, what press did, it's not just to lose election. The press, and you can hate me for that, but the press lost the World War III. The press did it. You will realize it later when we feel that, when we feel the beginning, when we see the beginning, when we will see the suffering, when we will see the end. But no, those are the people fully responsible. And I understand that every single press or media outlet has an owner and has sponsors, and they dictate what to say and how to say it. Trust me, I'm in this business, I know. But every single person has dignity and has access to live streams like this, to Substacks and blogs and vlogs and whatever you want to do. If you want to convey a message, you can. And don't tell me that some reporters could not be united together to report. We see that somebody whose cartoon was not approved by Washington Post quit, put the cartoon out, and said why he or she, I think it was a he, was fired. It is possible. It is available. We're no longer in the 60s where you have 3 channels and you have to bow down to be somewhere. You have access. It's free. Open your talk. People will unite behind you. You lost the election. You lost World War III. You did it. You did it because you wanted to report on it, because you wanted to do the clickbaity stuff. How does it feel? And who at MSNBC did prohibit Lawrence to do this interview before the election? Can we know? Who? And now we're fully in oligarchy. And we're going to dive in the news today, and I will guide you through what's going to happen, what I feel is going to happen, what I see is going to happen, what incognito, what type of information I got from reporters, known reporters, warning me about the election and being there physically. I will guide you through once this interview is over, but let's watch it till the end. Dangerous times. There is no integrity. Bonnie says, where's the integrity, the ethical, moral behavior? There is no integrity. It's just clickbait. And the more clickbaity stuff you do, the more you think you will stay employed, but you won't. Once Trump is in, the press access will be denied and you're fired anyway. You think you were smarter than the system? You think you were smarter than the history? Give me a break. Let's continue with the interview.
You began your State Department speech this week with material from this, which is just being released now. Your report on investing in America. I believe I have the first official public copy of it.
You do. My staff told me they gave that.
And I'm reading in there about water projects in Alabama and projects around the country that will be done after you leave this office, will be worked on after you've left this office, for which it is very unlikely they're going to name it the Biden Water Project in Alabama. And so there's so much to talk about in terms of just your domestic achievements alone. This is the largest list of domestic achievements that I can think of, certainly in my lifetime of watching this. But I want to bring this down to something about your presidential decision-making in that entire range of domestic policy decisions, of which there were so many. And I'm particularly interested in Joe Biden versus Larry Summers. And here's what I mean by that. You're in here as the president of the United States, who we know as Joe from Scranton. And when you are creating your domestic policy response to the COVID pandemic, the stimulus that is going to be necessary for the economy, money that's going to be necessary to put into people's checking accounts, and then all of the domestic infrastructure spending you're doing, Harvard economics professor Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, a very well-regarded economist around the world, is out there arguing these policies are risky. This risks inflation, significant risk of inflation. He warned against inflation very loudly. He also then predicted, when you overruled that particular piece of advice, he then predicted that we would be in a recession eventually, which has not happened. But
almost everybody predicted.
How do you, in the presidential position of having to make these decisions, when you're hearing prestigious economists like him and other voices out there, and possibly people within the administration, giving you counter advice to the direction you want to go, how do you then decide to make that decision to go ahead?
Two things. One, look, I looked at the practical need for us to instill some confidence in the American people that we can grow this economy. And one of the biggest pieces of that was invest in America. Everybody thought, and I thought Barack was a great president. I was his vice president. We went through some, but remember the argument, well, I thought we didn't do enough. I thought we didn't invest enough because we were doing the old basic old economics from the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
But at the time, you did do what you called a very big deal, Obamacare, which was a gigantic
Exactly
legislative
right.
achievement. Yeah.
Exactly right. And I did that for two reasons. Well, that was the president was the leader on that. But we did that for two reasons. One, it was necessary. Look, nothing works unless if you conclude the only way to deal with inflation is to create unemployment and another recession, because you had to make sure that we lost jobs. That's the only way you're going to keep the inflation down. But guess what? I was absolutely convinced. Give the American people half a shot. They'll step up and get the job done if you give them the opportunity. Look what they did. They stepped up in every major endeavor. And the idea, and I never believed we couldn't have a soft landing.
Mm-hmm.
We had a soft landing. Inflation's down almost to 2%. A lot going on. But the first thing we had to do was go out and take care. And I had an advantage and disadvantage. I had a thing called a pandemic that was so badly handled that we were still dealing with people, thousands of people a day dying in America. Well, first of all, it was rationale to spend the money to go take care of that. That was the first big piece of legislation that got passed. And secondly, when I came along and said, look, in addition to that, we can now change the dynamic and invest more in the things that make us who we are. For example, I remember walking through I used to commute every day to Delaware, 300 miles a day, basically, each way, total round trip. And going through the Baltimore Tunnel, I'm probably the only guy that's not an engineer that walked through that tunnel. Last piece of work done in that tunnel going under the bay was, I think it was like 1917 or 18 or 19. Light bulbs hanging down from inside, the water leaking in. What else are we talking about, man? So these are things and they were going to create jobs immediately. So you start building that tunnel, you're creating thousands of jobs. People are getting paid a good salary. You're generating American product to build it. And look, the other thing, Lawrence, I got a lot of criticism, understandably. We've invested more in red states than blue states.
That's in this book. That's in this report.
Well, for two reasons. One, red states really screwed up in terms of the way they handle their economy and the way they handle manufacturing, the way they handle access to supply chains. I remember being out in Iowa, and I remember one of the big issues was that there was a small plant for 300 people, been around for 70 years. My grandfather worked there, I worked there, my son works there. And they had the best education system at the time and rated the best state education system in the country. And all of a sudden the kid comes home after he graduates and, Mom, I got to leave. There's no job for me here. The factory shut down. Well, guess what? How do you run a country that way? How do you do that? So, for example, that's why I worked so damn hard to get the CHIPS and Science Act done. It brought in billions of dollars in investment, billions. Now, the problem is, it's only now starting to see it because it takes time to get it done. But the point is, and we ended up bringing $1 trillion off the sidelines, not just there, but an investment. I was absolutely convinced, give the people half a shot at a job where they can make a decent living, and you can't deny them the opportunity to form a union to get a good wage. For example, I'm getting off, but my point is, I was never bought on to the notion, if the only way in 2021 to grow the economy was significantly increase unemployment in order to take control of what we're talking about in terms of inflation. Where the hell are we? What happens? But people are now we got a lot of work to do yet. But people are now having faith in we can do these things. We can build these, we can build these cars, we can do that. And people are investing in it. And people are taking those jobs and it's attracting money into the economy. And inflation is going down. We have a lot of problems. We do have a lot of corporate greed still out there in terms of everything from what we do with the basic needs of American people, from eggs to butter to bread to gasoline. But we're also dealing with that. But it seems to me, I don't know how we can be the leader in terms of our national security if we're not also one of the wealthiest countries in the world that funds it all and convinces other people we're willing to play with them. We're willing to work with them. We're not trying to cut them out. We're going to cut them in. Anyway, I just think that, and I never bought the argument that it was going to cause a significant recession. Now, most of these guys are talking about a soft landing. We got more work to do. But the idea, the way we're going to deal with inflation is create more unemployment.
That has been a policy choice made by previous
I
presidents.
know, and I think I've thought it was wrong for a long time.
Yeah.
Look,
Could I ask you about something you've said about your own political approach to this? And that is you said it was stupid as a joke that you didn't sign the checks that went out to people from your administration when you were giving COVID help after Donald Trump put his name on the checks that went out during his administration. And when I heard that, I believe I know what that was. I believe that you were approaching it exactly the same way the guy over the fireplace, Franklin Roosevelt, approached Social Security checks. First one went out in 1940 when he's running for re-election, and it's signed by the chief disbursing officer of the Treasury, because it would be indecent and beyond his comprehension that a president would dare take credit for something that was legislated by the Congress and that was enacted that way. And I'm assuming, did it cross your mind to put your name on the checks?
only in that I kept being here from other people. The president sent me a check for $7,500. The president did it. Why aren't you helping me? Well, it was a bill we did, but anyway. It did cross my mind, but what the mistake we made was, I think I made, was not getting our allies to acknowledge that the Democrats did this. So, for example, build a new $1 billion bridge over a river. We'll call it the Democratic Bridge, figuratively speaking. Talk about who put it together. Let people know that this was something the Democrats did, that it was done by the party. That's different than me writing a check and me signing a check and saying, I did it. I'm not a very good huckster. I mean, you know, that wasn't a stupid thing for him to do. It helped him a lot. And it undermined our ability to convince people that we were the ones that were getting this to them. And so, but I don't think, ironically, I almost spent too much time on the policy, not enough time on the politics. Because, I mean, you know, you have some senators in Congress, Democratic senators in Congress saying, well, you know, Joe Biden did this, and this is done by so-and-so and so-and-so, and this is the new, you know, bill by the Democratic Party kind of thing. Let people know who was responsible for this happening. But it just seems, I know it sounds so stupid to say it, almost bad taste.
Bad taste does not sound stupid, and we've been getting the signal to wrap this up for a while, and so we will. Quick question. When was the first time you said the words ceasefire to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The first time was probably when he moved really hard on the Philadelphia line and took out a hospital. Now, it's true that Sinwar and those guys were hiding underneath the hospital. The thing about Hamas is they had all their facilities underneath schools, hospitals, churches. I mean, so you had, and to get them, you had to take people out. Let me put it this way. I'll just say it. When I went to Israel, immediately after their attack by Hamas, 8 days later, whatever it was, and I told them we were going to help. And I said, but Bibi, I said, you can't be carpet bombing these communities. And he said to me, well, you did it. You carpet bomb, not his exact words, but you carpet bomb Berlin. You dropped a nuclear weapon. You killed thousands of innocent people because you had to in order to win a war. I said, but that's why we came up with the UN. New deals by which what we would do relative to civilians and military.
So he was comparing 21st century war tactics, battle tactics, with World War II.
Well, what he was really doing is he was going after me for saying you can't indiscriminately bomb civilian areas, even if the bad guys are there. Even if the bad guys are there, you can't take out 2, 10, 12, 1,500 people, innocent people, in order to get the one bad guy. And he made a legitimate argument. His perspective said, look, these are the guys that kill my people. These are the guys that are all over in these tunnels. Nobody had any idea the mile the tunnels were down there. It's amazing what they built. And they're sometimes 200 feet under the ground. Only way to get to them is take out the places where they were under which they got to the tunnels. And so that's the first time I had the discussion about bombing civilian areas was when I went over after the 9/11, after the massacre that occurred.
So on that first trip, 10, 11 days after October 7th, you already raised the issues of how to get to a ceasefire.
Well, not a ceasefire, how to prevent innocent death.
Yes.
And then I pushed really, really hard for more humanitarian aid to go in and ways to get it in. And Bibi, look, in fairness to Bibi, he's got a tough coalition too, man. He's got the most conservative cabinet of any Israeli prime minister ever.
With that, did you have reason to believe that the prime minister was delaying agreement with a ceasefire for his own politics and with the political knowledge that a ceasefire would help your reelection campaign or Vice President Harris's presidential campaign?
No, I don't think it had to do with it to help our campaign versus Trump. I don't think that was his calculus. But I do think he's in a position where even now it takes a lot of courage for him to take on that coalition he has, because they're going to vote him out of office tomorrow. Remember, there was already the big fight about what he was going to do relative to the court. And so, in fairness to Bibi, he had enormous political pressure not to do some of the things, that in my belief I thought were counterproductive.
Mr. President, I'd like to end this conversation where we began it, which is you last night getting up from that desk, and as I was being hustled out of the room with the rest of the press, I saw your family surrounding you, Vice President. And whenever I see that group and I see that moment with the Biden family, I always see the one who wasn't there. I always see Beau, and I always wonder as I was walking down the hall, what would Beau be saying to his father right now?
Look, Beau is a better man than I am. I ask myself a couple times a month, what would Beau do? He was the Attorney General who would have been the odds-on favorite to win the government. I mean, when he went to Iraq for a year. Beau and Hunter have always had faith in my instincts, what I think. you've heard Barack get mad at me when I was a kid all the time. So he said, I know, all politics is personal.
Yeah.
Well, it's about understanding what motivates the other guy, other woman, and what their interests are. And I think that let me end it this way. When I ran as a 29-year-old kid for the United States Senate against, you know, Caleb Boggs, a really fine guy, a moderate Republican. He was a supporter of the Clean Air Act.
Mhm.
And Nixon won my state by only 60%, about 60% of the vote, and I won by 3,100 votes. And I made 3,800 votes. And everybody would say, "What's the secret? What's the secret?" No, because it's a logical thing. Every new candidate, what did you figure out? How'd you do that? You're the first guy to win. And I said, you got to figure out what's worth losing over. What's worth losing over? Don't figure that out. You should get in another business. Go make money. Do something else. But I think it's important. And another noble about this is I've never proposed something or did something that I believe is a mistake. I made mistakes, but that I believe it was a mistake just to stay in office. And so I said, all these young new candidates, what's the secret? I said, have you figured out what's worth losing over? And all kidding aside, why would you get into this job? What's the value of this job? Not to be president of the United States Senate, unless you know what you want to change. And I'm convinced that people, it's really important to understand where the other guy's coming from. One of the things I learned when I got to the Senate, how different the interest, the legitimate interest of someone living in Wyoming is than someone living in New Jersey. Different interest. Sort of solid Americans, but out in Wyoming, man, you better get more energy, you better get more things moving. New Jersey, you better make sure you're dealing with clean air. And so there's real differences among us. We're 50 different states, 50 many countries. And as long as you understand what's motivating the other guy, the other woman, that is based on something that they genuinely believe is an interest of the state, you can work something out. You can sit down and say, okay, look, but if you know it's just done for power or for a special interest, then you don't have to pay attention to it. I'm getting way over my skis here.
Mr. President, I just can't thank you enough for joining me in this conversation today. Thank you for your 50 years of service. And again, thank you for joining this conversation today.
Well, I tell you what, man, I'm really only 40. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I wish I could just end here because anything or nothing that I will say will do the justice. America could have had another 4 years of good life, but it chose to be raped, I guess. Very interesting, very revealing. Thank you, President Biden. We had a glimpse of the best. It's interesting, David, you said he's the best. And boy, we're going to miss him, says Bonnie. Yeah. We had a glimpse of the best. I don't know. Again, it's difficult to judge presidents like, let's say, Washington and, that going that far, right? Because usually we get more based on not what they said, unless those were some notes that they passed along, but how wise they were, usually it's a hearsay. But from my lifetime, from anybody who is, let's say, Biden's age, I don't think we had somebody this wise, honestly. And I'm a nerd when it comes to history, and I watch speeches, Roosevelt and all that stuff. But Churchill, yeah, but he's of that caliber. If anything, he is of that caliber. He is in the wrong. He's surrounded. It sounds like you have a jam, and instead of having something that will surround it to present it really, really well and appreciate it, right? It's wrapped in a piece of garbage. America did not see the good guy, and will learn a hard way by things being taken away from us. And by things, I mean freedoms, unfortunately. Wealth and freedoms, comfort. Comfort will be taken away, freedoms will be taken away, opportunities will be taken away. So that's what the oligarchy brings with itself, On this wonderful note, I want to share with you that I did not pass the loyalty test as a White House reporter. Don't count on me to be reporting on Trump administration, at least from the rooms. And I'm very happy about it. Very happy that what Biden just said. Know what's worth losing for, right? Know your reasons that would explain to you and would make sense to you to lose something over. Know your reasons. God damn it, I know my reasons. And instead of being bandy, to be somewhere, to report on something, to take that selfie, to say, I'm here, I'm part of the crew. No. So I now have my loyalty, and I think I did pass my loyalty test, and that is good. So for that reason, a lot of things will be changing. I'm very happy that we're turning Honest Foundation into a foundation and nonprofit, that we will be focusing, and it's very interesting that Lawrence did this type of interview, that we will be focusing on interviews based on historical facts with people like, including President Biden and First Lady Biden, but also Clinton's, to talk about what did happen, what was their preview, what was their insight. I'm looking forward to talking to Hillary Clinton as to what disinformation played in her, what role disinformation played in her presidential journey or attempt to become a president. Remember Pizzagate and all that kind of stuff. She has a lot to say on that regard. And I really wholeheartedly want to talk about history, connect the dots, learn to analyze, learn to read between the lines. And I mean, learn, we all will be learning. I will just be that face sitting there asking questions, but we all together will be learning. And that's type of coverage I want to focus on, because that coverage is what they call in this business is evergreen, right? Clickbait coverage is only, it's like fast food. It's only relevant because it's hot right now. It's not relevant 5 minutes later because it's useless information. It just trickled to your nerve system, like, your system. You're like, oh, interesting, click. They got divorced, click, it's like what before was Hollywood, right? And people who would follow gossip and celebrity gossip. It really doesn't change your life at all, but it tickles something. So it satisfies your little anxiety, like maybe you're nosy or whatever. And so all of that is now the reporting on the news. I think it will be a lot of that clickbaity stuff. So instead of populating my nightly coverage with a lot of like he said, she said, which is literally mainstream media. Listen, I'm naturally anemic. And I thought, I was told to drink coffee, to take salt, whatever, to raise my blood pressure. And yesterday I tuned in to mainstream media for 10 minutes. My blood pressure was through the roof. And I thought, why I never thought about it? That's like Oh, full moon. That's like the best, method. Should have just turned mainstream media, and stop taking the pills. But it's so much garbage. They're still discussing who gets the credit for the ceasefire deal that Netanyahu, by the way, canceled out. I have a readout. They're still talking about it. It doesn't change your life. It doesn't contribute to nothing. It's a bunch of nothing. I don't want to be called White House reporter because you have to pass tests and loyalty. Come on now. What is this? This is stupid. No, hell no. So we'll focus on the interviews and conversations. They do matter. We will have nightly coverage of facts that did happen. Also, beginning January 20th, I will be making those, this whatever happens, very short. And we will be discussing things and having conversations here. But I will not be reporting on everything he said, she said stuff, because if press pool were to stay, which, listen, I hope I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. Press pool will be eliminated once Musk is in. Musk is not going to allow press pool to report on everything he said and did to Trump and every single second. So my other concern is, and this is very interesting, today I had 3 meetings with people who I thought were actually Democrats. Turned out they're hidden MAGA. That aside, who think that they're more excited about Musk coming to Oval Office than Trump. And I said, at this point, I know that we can survive Trump presidency because we did. Can we survive Musk's shadow presidency? That's where I have a question, right? That's where my fears are. That's where President Biden's fears are. Because if somebody just put this together, somebody who was never elected, had never to disclose businesses and where he makes money and how and what and from which government, had never to give up those businesses. Even Trump had to give his businesses to his kids now to be president, right? All of those, whoever came to his nominees, to his office, whatever. Not elected, still keeps the billions that are all federally based, sponsored, right? So federal contracts based. That's where the wealth comes from. Plus, the wealth comes from China and other adversaries. I'm sure we don't know half of it. And still gets an office at the White House, if not the Oval Office, and will do everything. And this is what I feel, and usually my intuition, my knowledge doesn't fail me. I hope it does here. I wholeheartedly hope. But I think once Trump is sworn in, the operation put J.D. Vance in charge will begin. That's what what makes sense. Being with Trump in Oval Office is not enough. Trump has opinions. He's unpredictable. He wakes up, decides what to do that day. He is flashy. There is no strategy. He is also anti-China, which is very controversial to Musk's plans. He's dependent on China. He's not just pro-China. His wealth depends as much as on our federal dollars, as so much so on China. The 60% tariffs on China, no way, Jose, this will be somewhere in. So this battle will begin at 12:01. Once Trump is sworn in, that's where this battle will start. And it will be fast. I don't think it will be dragging itself out. It will be fast when it comes to Ukraine. And based on, yesterday I told you that I will be tuning into a session in Paris, which was very interesting today. What I didn't know, for instance, in Italy, they'll have, let's say, somebody who has served as a prime minister, so to speak. They never retire. They become senators for life. And they have this sort of like a consortium or sort of like a coalition of former leaders, right? Minus Mussolini and all these people. So the former prime ministers had this sort of meeting together also with the French side. And I was 10 minutes late because I was coming from another briefing. And I'm coming in and I'm just like, whoa, what am I, I miss this European frankness, right? Where you don't sort of like zhuzh yourself in. You start with like, jumping into the river. And the rhetoric that they were saying, they're like, okay, we begin the trade war with the United States. So now what we need to do is we need to realize if we don't trade with the United States, we will have to be trading with China, because to make everything in Italy and France and Germany, we don't have time nor resources, nor people will be willing to pay the price for it. So then we have to trade with China. But if we do trade with China, China will we're pretty much supporting Russia. That will be, once Ukraine is given up by Trump, China will be sponsoring Russia, that will be invading European countries, and we will be paying for those invasions and withstanding those invasions. So the point is, will EU withstand this pressure, or will EU fall apart because each country will be fighting for itself? And then they start fighting, having this rhetoric about Germany, that Germany wins all the tenders. When it comes to EU, any contracts are usually given to German companies. So their industrial base is more supported than French and Italian one. But meanwhile, France and Italy are agreeing that we hope that this tariff war will not go into a bloody war, but we anticipate that it will, given that we will be forced to trade with China, which will ultimately support Russia, and yada, yada, yada. And that was 90-minute talk. And those are not, influencers or armchair professionals. Those are prime ministers, former prime ministers, who are currently senators, who have a vote, who have a say, and this was all on the record. So for that reason, they're not talking as to, will Trump do it or no? Will he give up on Ukraine or no? The stage where we are right now. They're talking about the next steps and the real opportunities. They're doing the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? And so they're really planning this. It was just mind-blowing as to how behind we are in our thinking here. And if we see that the most Googled word after President Biden's presidential address yesterday, the farewell address, was oligarchy. People in America Googled, what is oligarchy? Yeah. So, Alexander, hey, Alexander, hello, minus Berlusconi, yeah, Mussolini, Berlusconi, and all that kind of stuff, yeah. But it's very interesting how they don't have this type of hope or this sort of utopia as to, oh, maybe we will convince Trump as this and this. No, they're talking about other steps. And I'm worried more about Musk being shadow president and all of these people above. For instance, I told you a month ago where that if TikTok sells, it will be bought by Musk. And so what are the rumors tonight? Right? Because that was a weird thing. Before going to the meetings, I saw that 3 senators were pushing Biden to sign executive order to prolong TikTok's existence for 60 to 90 days. And I'm thinking, why are we pivoting? Isn't that national security concern? It still should be, right? And then I'm thinking, is TikTok selling to Musk? Because that's what Biden will be preventing with this executive order, right? Hoping that something can be coming through, right? Like, do you want China to have access to our data, or you want Musk to rule TikTok, right? And so that will be then Twitter on steroids now, with the video, with all the disinformation, all that kind of stuff. So, and TikTok Shop and 170 million users. And then the rumor comes in that China said if we were to sell, we would only sell to Musk. And then see the connection between China and Musk. And Taiwan, it will be propaganda. If you think that from the river to the sea propaganda was striking, believe me, the anti-Taiwan and Taiwan is part of China, same as Hong Kong, that will start. That will be the same thing. So incredible. Just yeah, it's like, feels like you're on Titanic and you're like, okay, shall we play the violin or shall we go eat? You're like, or shall I just jump off? Because it's, interesting. Anyway, I hope I'm wrong. I will say it on the record. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm a dumbass, and whatever I say makes no sense. But unfortunately, I feel like it does. Anyway, let's check your comments. Bonnie says there's something mentally missing from the culty brains. Culty brain. Yeah. Why are they so angry all the time in the oligarchy? Because they're trained to be angry. You know, it's like what unites the MAGA world is the anger against others, right? That's what unites them together, the anger and the willingness and the determination to get into the Oval Office. Once they're there, and that's what I mean, 1201, the biggest fight will start within them because they're already at the Oval Office. Nothing unites them. And then everyone will have their true motivation revealed, right? Who is pro-China, who's against China, who's pro-Russia, who's against Russia, who's for Ukraine, anti-Ukraine. Like there's so many conflicts of interest within that office, that team that Trump put together, that, you know, it will be interesting to see. It's interesting, but also dangerous. You know, it's like watching something die, right? Interesting what the process is, but democracy sort of coughing up. Roberto says, Bonnie, Hillary sure was right about everything. The Clintons and Trump were friends at one time. Indeed. But again, I'm looking forward to having candid conversations. I have to see the way I want to frame it, but you know, one of my ideas was to talk to leaders about anything but politics, and so allow them to talk about policies, meet them on the personal level, so they're not, you know, feeling that they're cornered in a political conversation. They have to be very careful as to how they voice and phrase themselves. Another story would be to have their point of view on what really happened and combating disinformation, not just in the present tense, but also in past tense. Because if you hear from Hillary Clinton, same as you just heard from President Biden as to what really happened behind the scenes, you realize where we actually are. So, on that regard. Okay, so let's get to some quick news. Let me read it out. Mayor Adams from New York City is headed to Mar-a-Lago. He wants that pardon. Adams has made quite clear his willingness to work with Trump and his incoming administration on behalf of New Yorkers, and that partnership with the federal government is critical to New York City's success. He wants a pardon. He doesn't give a damn about New York City's success. The Biden administration is exploring ways to keep TikTok accessible in the United States, even as a ban is set to take effect on Sunday. NBC News reported late Wednesday. I told you why. Now, the CEO of TikTok, Shou-Zi Chew, plans to attend U.S. President-elect Trump's inauguration. The New York Times reported on Wednesday. He will be seated right behind Trump, which is rumored to be Michelle Obama's place. On another note, those are the oligarchs that are attending the inauguration, so he will not be alone. China's Vice President Heng Zheng will attend U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. On January 20th, Trump did invite Xi, but Xi will not be showing up, but their vice president will be representing China. By the way, no American inauguration or inauguration of an American president has been attended by foreign leaders since 1867, I believe, but 1800s, which I guess there was France and Britain. Now, U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen was in New York yesterday. She got an award, had a farewell speech, but her computer was hacked and unclassified files were accessed as part of a broader breach of the Treasury Department by Chinese state-sponsored hackers. Bloomberg News reported today, citing two people familiar with the matter. But we have Vice President of China attending the inauguration. Now, Scott Bessento, however you pronounce his name, I don't watch the hearings, so I'm not sure. That Trump's appointee to be to lead the Treasury instead of Secretary Yellen. He vowed on Wednesday to ensure that dollar remains the world's reserve currency as he laid out a vision for a new economic golden age. Well, thank you. It's not ruble. Now, he also
said that extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts that are set to expire at the end of this year is the single most important economic issue of the day of any oligarch, right? Also, he said that 100% he supports 100% raising sanctions on Russian oil producers if the future president requests to do so. That's the key here, if he requests to do so. By the way, President Biden did sanction Russian oil, not just producers, but also shadow fleet, and they cannot even dump whatever they brought next to China or to China today. So this was announced earlier, and then China did allow one ship to actually arrive. So this has been done. I'm not sure what they're talking about additional sanctions. If anything, Trump's team will lift the sanctions. U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen said on Wednesday that Trump's plan to establish a new government agency to collect tariffs, he wants to do, instead of IRS, or in addition to IRS, which is Internal Revenue Service, he wants to do ERS, External Revenue Service. And I explained it to you 2 days back that it doesn't exist. The tariffs are counted into pricing for end consumer, which are us. So it makes no sense to have such agency. It doesn't function this way. So Yellen said that this agency would duplicate an existing agency and is unlikely to save money. Well, she's very nice and polite. Now, President Biden is weighing action aimed at advancing the Equal Rights Amendment, which would prohibit discrimination based on sex before he leaves office on Monday. The Washington Post reported on Thursday, citing people familiar with discussion. So he's planning to do that tomorrow. Also, Biden's administration on Thursday today moved to put more of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge off limits to oil and gas development in a last-minute bid to complicate Trump's efforts to boost drilling in the area. Again, all of those are executive orders based on Trump's team. They have 500 executive orders for him to sign on January 20th. Let's see what will be in it and why is it 500. Anyway, current laws and regulations are not enough to protect Americans from the risks of compounded versions of popular weight loss drugs, especially those bought online, said today outgoing U.S. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Robert Califf. He was sort of silent about it, that people are very into Ozempic and all this type of, other stuff. But again, this is not really studied much. And he voiced his opinion that the risks are there, and we will have to see what the risk will be, if any, once some time passes, right? Now, FBI leaders have warned that hackers who breached AT&T's system last year likely stole months of agents' call and text logs, prompting an urgent effort to safeguard confidential informants' identities, Bloomberg News reported on Thursday. So FBI used AT&T system that was hacked, and so now they have to go back or stop using AT&T at least. Now, U.S. Representative Mike Turner said on Wednesday that he will no longer serve as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee after nearly 2 years. According to media reports, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson removed Turner from the role. By the way, on side note, the reason for that was that he is too pro-Ukraine and not enough anti-China. Those were two things. Now, multiple hecklers interrupted U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken today on Thursday. He came to the press briefing, which is a rare occasion because it's usually, press briefing is handled by the Speaker of the, same as the White House, but the Department of State. And so he joined the meeting. He wanted to deliver, because he really tried to attempt to do it, 3 to 5 minutes speech, right? An opening speech talking about the accomplishments of the administration. Also the ceasefire deal, what it meant to him. His father, by the way, was the one who founded Israeli University. So for him, it's very personal. And he was interrupted by people who came in as reporters. State Department is different from the White House. You can just join in briefing, And if you show your passport, you get like a little like badge. And unless you want to register for a permanent badge, but anybody can enter if they show a letter that they're a reporter. So these people entered. This is the From the River to the Sea people. They might as well be reporters, but they started screaming. They were literally picked up and dragged out of the briefing room. It happened multiple times. It was sort of like a synchronized act. It was one, he was dragged out, another one, third one. So it was very interesting. Now, Trump's pick to lead the Environmental Protection Agency said today that he believes climate change is real, wow, and a threat. But this is Environmental Aid Protection Agency, potential head of Environmental Protection Agency, okay? Says climate change is real, but the agency he's about to lead is just authorized but not required to regulate carbon emissions. Now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Thursday, today, picked State Attorney General Ashley Moody to succeed Marco Rubio when he leaves his office to become the next U.S. Secretary of State. By the way, he will be probably the first one to be approved, and at least he's not facing any issues to be approved. So this move will maintain Republicans' majority in that chamber. This is not Laura Trump. She resigned from being the co-chair of RNC. Maybe she will be the singer. Probably she will be that surprise guest on Trump's celebration on that balls or whatever. So we'll see. Now, Trump's incoming national security advisor said today that the new administration will keep TikTok alive in the United States if there is a viable deal. Quote, "We will put measures in place to keep TikTok from going dark." That's Mike Walls told Fox News, noting that the law gives authority for a 90-day extension for the app's Chinese owner ByteDance to complete the divest, or to divest, right? So with probably Musk buying it, that makes total sense that they will do it. My only question is if President Biden does not have any extension and TikTok were to shut down on Sunday, Trump is coming 12:01 on Monday, so how's that going to go? Anyway, now, Trump plans to announce Sean Curran as his pick for Director of Secret Service, CNN reported this evening, citing multiple sources familiar with the plan. Curran has served as the special agent in charge of Trump's security detail and was with him. Now, check this out. At the time of an assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, just one of those people who let him pose, he will be the head of Secret Service. Makes no sense. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Global news, or let's check some comments. I got some few comments here. So the clip on that, Bonnie says there's definitely risk associated with those mats. Yeah, with the skinny, yeah, absolutely. Jay says we're totally and utterly cooked. About to. Okay, so global news. Israel delayed approval of a deal with Palestinian group Hamas for a ceasefire in Gaza Strip and release of hostages, but the United States said it still expected the agreement to go into effect on Sunday as planned. Netanyahu is dragging this thing out. That's the only thing what I sort of agree to disagree with President Biden, where he said that, Netanyahu's plan was not to benefit Trump. I think it was, because it's very obvious. So now, air defense was engaged in Ukraine's capital of Kiev today to repel Russian drone attack, officials said. Well, okay, normal occurrence. What was not normal, that UK's Prime Minister Starmer was exactly at that location in Kiev today because he was visiting Zelensky and signing an agreement of cooperation when it comes to defense and complete alliance for the next 100 years. Starmer also said that the world's future is being decided here in Kiev. He visited also wounded and soldiers and pledged allegiance pretty much, or in collaboration and alliance with Ukraine for the next 100 years. And then Russians decided to send this drone exactly to that location where Starmer was visiting. But thankfully, nothing happened. Now, co-leader of Germany's far-right Alternative for Germany Nazi Party will attend the inauguration of Trump just a month before their federal election in Germany. So their election is on February 23rd, the day Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. But they will be attending, and they will be this precious guests. Also, all the far right parties from Argentina, Milei will be there, and others as well. Bolsonaro, by the way, the Brazilian past leader from the past, could not get his passport from their State Department, or whatever the alternative is, or equivalent is to our State Department, because he's a flight risk, and so he will not be able to attend this inauguration. Also, Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada will not be attending the inauguration. He is holding a minister's retreat where they are playing out different scenarios how to face the 25% tariffs from US, and he will not be attending. But guess what? The far-right party in Canada, whatever their leader is, it's a woman, will be attending the inauguration. Okay. Now, on this note, I want to share something. I cannot say which outlet and who, but I was messaged by somebody, and they said, be very careful about the inauguration, because, and it's just, I take it as is, because that's what I've heard. I'll share it. I'm not going to do #actual news, because that's somebody shared with me, that the seating chart of the inauguration will have the, like when the president stays, right, and delivers, and it's a podium, it's in the balcony, right, you picture Capitol, and in front of it, people are seated, and they're seated in sections. So there's a section with January 6th people. There's a section with Proud Boys. There's a section with the far-right German party. So all of these people are seated in the front. And also there is a difference in color of the badges for the press. Like regular press and the MAGA press have different colors of the badges. And that's sort of like, I've never seen it. They've never seen it. And it's sort of an interesting thing. Now, Central African Republican President Faustin Archange Touadera was meeting with Putin today in Kremlin to discuss ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation. So since 2018, paramilitary fighters from Russia's Wagner Group have been supporting government forces in Central African Republic. By the way, a same Wagner Group in 2018 supported Maduro and his stay in power in Venezuela. So and they're hosted in Africa now. Also, it's very much known in Eastern Europe that Putin's money, he's an oligarch, one of many, but the biggest one in Russia, and so that he has his money hidden in Africa in terms of gold and any precious stones or whatever, so that he has his wealth actually in Africa, and so for that reason he does help the region. So it's not in Russia. Again, take it as is. So Brazil's Supreme Court on Thursday denied Bolsonaro, their former president, a request to have his passport reinstated, preventing him from traveling to the inauguration of Trump. Now, Iraq is trying to convince powerful armed factions in the country that have fought U.S. forces and fired rockets and drones at Israel to lay down their weapons or join official security forces, Foreign Minister of Iraq said. So they pretty much want to unite against U.S. or stop sort of bothering U.S. because if U.S., we meaning U.S., were to retaliate, if they are fractured, then they can't withstand any power. Now, the World Health Organization, that certainly whose budget will be cut under Trump regime because it's none of his interest, they launched their annual appeal for funding to respond to health emergencies today. Days before inauguration of Trump as president, the agency's biggest donor are us, United States, and that all puts in question or question mark over its long-term finances. So WTO is not going to be, or WHO will not be able to sustain themselves in case we were to face a big pandemic or any type of threat without our investment. So for that reason, remains to be seen. Now, President Biden also boosted security ties with Cyprus on Wednesday. All of this just tells you that Europe is being prepared or is preparing for any potential conflict with Russia and their allies. So President Biden issued a presidential memorandum that makes the Eastern Mediterranean island eligible to receive American defense articles and military sales. Russia is very upset about it. That is what President Biden did today. Now, as to Canada, Canada could impose countermeasures on up to 150 billion Canadian dollars worth of U.S. imports if President-elect Trump imposes tariffs on Canadian goods and services, a source familiar with the matter said on Wednesday. And I do have a video from that ministers' retreat where all the ministers from different parties united in Canada to deliver a message to, of course, Canadians first and foremost, but also to Trump. Take a look.
Protect your jurisdiction, but country comes first. Canada's a priority. And I don't believe in jeopardizing one sector or another. Premier Smith's oil is Ontario's auto sector. But at the end of the day, when the tariffs come, it's going to affect Albertans. It's going to affect people from BC and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, all the way down the road. No one's exempt from that. If it comes to that, let's have the tools in our toolbox to react, to send a strong message. But it's not going to be all of a sudden one province or one territory is exempt on this. When Donald Trump comes at us, he's not going to say, well, let's not worry about Ontario. They're good people, or Alberta. He's coming full tilt at Canadians as a whole. And that's one thing we have to understand. We need to be united. You know, Donald Trump is a brilliant negotiator. That's what he's done his whole life. That's exactly what he's done. And he's sitting there with a big smile on his face thinking, wow, I'm going to divide and conquer. Remember one thing, united we stand, divided we fall. We need to be united.
He's just pointed out that he's a Canadian first, as much as he's passionate about Ontario. And I think that's something that we all share across this table of saying, you know what, the interest of this country means we're going to have to look at everything we can, and we'll make sure that it's fair across the country, but nothing can be off the table if the U.S. continues to choose to move forward with these punishing tariffs on both Canadians and Americans. Sorry, Wap, didn't mean to.
What I did want to say is that there is unity amongst the premiers of the provinces, the territories, the federal government, and where we have unity is that we're going to stand up for your jobs. And we're going to make your life more affordable. We want to keep standing up.
And so on and so forth. So Trump managed to unite Canada as much as Putin managed to ultimately unite NATO and get Finland and Sweden to join NATO, right? The Finalization of Europe that President Biden referred to failed, and NATOization of Finland happened. Okay, so former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney announced on Thursday that he was running to replace Prime Minister Trudeau as leader of ruling Liberal Party, saying he wanted to focus on struggling economy. Why am I laughing here? It's because they're repeating what we are repeating, right? Let's put business people, right? Because they think the statement that this fella made that Trump is a brilliant negotiator, somebody who inherited $3 billion in cash annually in business from his father and failed it. I don't know. But anyway, they want to put a former Bank of Canada governor to rule Canada and Liberty Party, Liberté, how they call them. Anyway, now Cuba began releasing prisoners on Wednesday who were jailed following anti-government protests in 2021, fulfilling a deal agreed with the Biden administration earlier this week. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday, removed Cuba from blacklist of nations that sponsored terrorism and rolled back a raft of sanctions implemented by Trump in 2021, just days before he left the Oval Office. During his first presidency, sanctions that have contributed to the communist-run island's worst economic crisis in decades. Now, former U.S. President Mike Pence is in Japan, and he's due to attend a high-profile business conference on Thursday. Well, he did attend today, where he discussed U.S. elections and their global negative implications. Okay. Just days before swearing in of Trump. So he traveled to Japan to warn them of Trump administration. And that's why Karen Pence, right? That's what her name is. Didn't get up, didn't shake Trump's hand, and was having a pretty good game going at the Carter's funeral. Now, South Korea's arrested president Yoon Suk Yeol, that's the first one who was impeached, does not intend to participate in a second day of questioning on Thursday, his lawyer said, further stonewalling a criminal probe into whether he committed insurrection with his martial law bid. So he's 3 weeks, he was not agreeing to be detained. Now he's detained, he's not attending the hearing and all that kind of stuff. Also, his supporters took to whatever, they implemented the saying, stop the steal in English and in Korean as their sort of motto for whatever. And they hope that Trump comes back and somehow will protect this guy. Now, 5 tankers carrying Russian oil, that's what I was referring to earlier, are stranded off China's coast, with 4 flagged under U.S. sanctions. Although the sanctions haven't taken effect, Chinese ports are reluctant to accept the shipments, causing a backlog. Then by the end of the day, it was informed that 1 tanker, subject to the new U.S. sanctions, is discharging Russian oil at a port operated by Shandong Port Group in East China. Shipping data on LSAC Econ showed on Thursday. So that was pretty much, expected. Let me bring this up. Hello. Okay, I wanted to show you some two videos and few pictures, and I'll let you go. I know it's super late. Thank you for being here with me. I truly appreciate you. I just didn't want to hold on till tomorrow. So something that really wonderful happened. When Trump was leaving office, he did not receive a farewell from the Pentagon. The reason was COVID, yada yada. But President Biden received a full-blown farewell with speeches from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, of course, speeches from President Biden, but also with parade, with marches, and with all full honors, right? Of course, VP Harris was there. You see from the right to the left, you see our Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, you see Vice President Harris, President Biden, and also this is on the left, what's his name? This is the Secretary of all Joint Forces. That's what it is. And so first, of course, national anthem. They saw all the troops, the divisions, and then President Biden was awarded with the medal for outstanding public service. And so Secretary Austin did award it with him. You see here the Department of Defense medal for distinguished public service. So President Biden did get his award. You see the medal here, and then with the paper. Then, which took kind of President Biden a little bit by surprise, our First Lady Jill Biden was awarded also a medal for distinguished public service. And of course, for President Biden, they did mention that, to his accomplishments, they account uniting NATO and protecting Ukraine and the uniting Indo-Pacific and also caring for the troops because he increased the pensions and whatnot. Also for the First Lady, and you see here her award, they said that she improved the lives of the military families. She built this Joint Forces Coalition. She made it easier for military spouses to get jobs, those that can be conducted virtually, not at location, and so altogether did improve their lives. And so take a look at this cute video where President Biden is sort of like a little bit surprised. Probably Secretary Austin held that bit of as a surprise for him. Take a look. Oh, there's no sound. Okay, so I'll narrate it. You see this happening here, and President Biden is just so happy. And a very, very happy occasion. And this is Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's wife, and they were all there together. It's a beautiful sight to see. I do have some pictures from that too, by the way. Do I? Yes, I do. I don't. Okay, to leave you on a sort of a funny and funky note, well, something I didn't mention that yesterday, and this is just to the decency and President Biden's approach to leadership. He directed his entire cabinet to sit together with the entire cabinet of these nominees of Donald Trump and play out different scenarios of what can happen on January 20th. It was between, cyber attacks and physical attacks and to even, some flu or whatever, right? So they played different scenarios, and the current Biden administration, and it was from Secretary Mayorkas to FBI, and everybody was present, Secretary Blinken and Buttigieg, and everybody was there. So they instructed their counterparts, and on their side, Hexas was there. Lloyd Austin was not there from our side. That's what sort of stood out to me. But they instructed them how to behave if something were to happen. So they really taught them step by step what could be happening and played out different scenarios just to ensure that on January 20th, nothing happens, and God forbid if anything, that they are prepared. Now, to leave you on a funky and funny note, something will make a big appearance at this military parade that Trump did order to happen after the oath ceremony, and this is the trash truck. So the dump truck will be making an appearance. It will be leading the parade. And after that, marching would be the forces from Butler, Pennsylvania, or not forces, but the police people and everybody who helped protecting Trump from Butler, were in Butler. So the dump truck leading the parade, the inaugural parade, is something that certainly will cause a lot of smiles and giggles in China and Russia and Iran and North Korea probably, but it's going to go viral because we're all for clickbait, right? Okay, I'm done. I'm done bothering you. Actually, I do have one more clip about Governor Newsom. This is clip of the day, which will be in our newsletter. Please check the newsletter, honestnetwork.com, ONEST network.com. Also posted everywhere on all socials. Just click and read. This will be the sort of video of the day where Governor Newsom is combating misinformation about the wildfires. So let's watch it for 1 minute, and then I'll really let you go. So
Never in California questioned whether or not we as taxpayers in the largest state in the union should support the people of Louisiana at a time of emergency and need. We never conditioned it. We never talked about putting the full faith and credit of the United States of America with the debt ceiling bill so we can get tax cuts for billionaires and corporations that don't need it, and then put at risk the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans that happen to live in California, a state with millions and millions of Trump supporters, Speaker Johnson. And Mr. President-elect, millions of your supporters are out here. They need your help. They need your empathy. They need your care, whatever compassion you can express, as opposed to condemnation. And divisive language that has aided and embedded nothing except mis and disinformation that's flamed fear and flamed a lot of anxiety for folks that are simply trying to recover. And at the same time, our first responders trying to address the emergency at hand, which still hasn't been fully buttoned up.
So the full video, by the way, is on Brian. I'll put the full video. I'll put the tag and to Brian's podcast, to the full video with Governor Newsom into the newsletter. So I'll recommend it as a watch tonight. And also there will be some recommended reads from our wonderful Terry, who dedicates so much of her time to trying to convince the Congress and, you know, everyone involved to not to vote in favor of RFK Jr. to lead our health administration. So we'll see, you know, what this will result in, but I will put some recommended or their articles as recommended reads, so you can see and also see how you can contribute to that as well. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. See you tomorrow night. Yeah. That's all. Thank you. Please reach out if you have any questions or comments or concerns, complaints, and we'll gladly read it. But see you tomorrow. Stay tuned for your newsletter where you can read everything I just said, but probably in better language. Okay? All right. Have a good night. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Stay peaceful, stay sane, keep your head on a swivel. All right? Good night.